George, welcome to the show, my friend. It's awesome to have you on. I learning about you and what you do, especially in our previous conversation, I was really inspired. It was just so cool to hear your perspective, your knowledge, your training. So it's great to have you on, man.
Thanks, Jake. Great to be here. What a fun thing to do on a Monday morning. Thanks for
That's
having me.
that's right. Fun thing on an early Monday morning. So, tell me first off. I think what one of the things that I love about you is your story, where you come from, and you share that on your site. You share that with people. What did your life used to look like, especially with reference to your addiction, but maybe overall as well?
Yeah. So I'm coming up on my 65th birthday, so there's a bit of history there. But yeah,
Why don't you start from when you were first born, and we'll go all to the last 65 years.
that'll be an interesting conversation. That'll tune people out pretty quickly. But yeah, let's just say that it wasn't going great. I was saddled with a lot of uncomfortable thoughts and emotions and behaviors that I just didn't know what to do with them. And
Hmm.
the genesis was childhood, but I carried them with me into adulthood, and I just was struggling. A lot of discomfort, a lot of activation in my nervous system, high stress all the time, um, defensive, angry, impatient. Just a lot of uncomfortable thoughts traveling through my head, quick to react. And so I just lived my life that way. And, it's just not pleasant, right? Always activated. Uh, n- Things are never enough. Always having to have more. You're not good enough. You need to do this. You need to do that. And so, just the underlying discomfort that I felt, was unpleasant and highly active. And then, I just got tired of it. And so along the way, I was coping through the use of addictive substances, and which only made it worse, right? Because when you abuse chemicals like that, it just further inflames and activates your nervous system, and just makes the underlying um, discomfort only worse. It's like, gasoline on a fire. And so, as addiction will do, it's progressive, and it got worse and worse. But that was really my adult life up until the age of about 50. And, I was an entrepreneur. So I was working in high stress environments all the time. So you start putting all these pieces together, and it just I wasn't happy, wasn't fulfilled. Um, didn't know why, didn't know what to do about it. Was there anything I could do about it? I just felt like this is who I was and what was given to me, and this is just the way it was. And I didn't spend any time contemplating if there was some way to do things differently. And so I hit a bottom at the age of 52, with, pain pills and alcohol. And I just, it just was the end of the road for me. I just had put off changing, and just kept, you know, heading down that path I was on, and until the path had come to an end, and there was a wall at the end of it, and I hit it hard. And that was the moment of truth, right? To figure out, was there going to be a different way of life for me?
Tell me about that end, George. What does that look like?
Painful. I was pretty good at addiction, so cur- I took it to
I used to be really good at addiction too. It was one of my greatest strengths.
yeah.
I managed to get addicted to anything and everything too, whatever behavior or substance it was, you know.
Yeah. So there are some predispositions and habit forming that go along with becoming very good at addiction, whether it's substances or behaviors or you name it.
Hmm.
And we can get into that in a little bit in terms of the neuroscience around it. But yeah, so it was really ugly. I scared my wife off. By that time, I had 3 DUIs. I'd hit a couple cars with people in it. Fortunately, nobody was seriously hurt. Consequences were piling up. My wife had left temporarily, and I was all alone at home, taking 50 pain pills a day and drinking 2 bottles of vodka. I crossed the line where my use was no longer uh, impulsive, it was compulsive. I just had to keep using in order to stop the withdrawals. So it was ugly. And, you know, um, I knew I knew I had to get into rehab. It just was something I had been avoiding. But, so that I remember that morning like it was yesterday, where I'd made the calls on Friday night. I suffered all weekend, and they were taking in new patients on Monday. And so I got a friend to take me into rehab, and that's where it started, and it's been, the road to recovery has been wonderful. It was tough at the beginning, but well worth it in the end.
So I have multiple questions on that. One, your wife, you said she left you temporarily, so you guys are still together now. Is that correct?
Yeah, for whatever reason, she's still here. And she's the
Yeah.
she's the saint.
Yeah,
Jen,
she's either totally amazing or completely insane.
yeah, probably a little bit of both. And as you know, in addiction, it's not just us who are suffering. It's all the
Yeah.
people around us. And
Yeah.
so I had put her through a great deal. And I still feel deeply about that. And it's one of the core motivating factors of me trying to be the best version of myself, is to be a good partner for her, and, try to make up for the time that, wasn't that way. So, yeah.
I actually I love what you've just said, George, because I think it reflects an attitude that has to come with true, long lasting recovery, which is this ownership of what we've done in the past and saying, this is where I was, this is the impact that it had on my loved ones, and feeling a real remorse for that. Not because I think it's very easy to conflate that, and you're already smiling and nodding your head, conflate it with a self-centered, shaming, I'm so bad, I'm so terrible, what's wrong with me? I think it's very easy to conflate that with this very real and something that's completely different, which is that it's that ownership, is an accountability. It's I accept what I did. How did you find that? Because this is really relevant to so many who are trapped in addiction, especially with something like porn addiction, which can be just as devastating and harmful as any other addiction. And then it also includes the sexual betrayal as well. So how did you, and that's probably a large question, but how did you take on that attitude of this? What I'm hearing is ownership, but maybe you put it a different way.
Yeah. Well, I've always been an accountable person, I feel, but, I had some great training early on in AA, 12 step.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, that program, and many like it, are all about accountability,
Yep.
accepting responsibility, being aware, making amends. Um, and so, if you continue to hang on to and harbor any vestige of excuse or rationalization or anything else, then you're unable to recover. Because what I found in recovery is that I needed to take myself down to the absolute foundation. All the studs had to come off. I had to rip down everything that had made me to that, who I was to that point, because I had developed, and here we go with neurology again, but
Mm-hmm.
um, I had developed so
Neuroscience,
many
yes,
bad
great.
patterns that had reinforced themselves over the years, that I needed to get rid of all those, shed those. And, we could talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But then once down to the foundation, I could then look at that foundation and decide, was my identity what I wanted it to be, which the answer was no.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and did I want to change it to something else and rebuild the house on top of that new foundation of a new identity? And that's really what recovery is all about, is you've got to take it down to the point where you are humbled and you recognize and are fully aware of what's happened as a result of your addiction, and that you will do anything to rebuild your life in a different way. And that includes, no more holding on to pride and the things that might be wrapped up in these patterns that you've developed to that point. And so yeah, that's really what it was about. And AA is very good about that. My sponsor was wonderful about, pointing out to me when I was holding on to anything that would be unproductive going forward. And
Hmm.
so that process, just and the act of hitting a bottom like I did is just really, humbling. Uh,
Yeah.
and I remember
Yeah.
sitting in rehab asking myself, how the hell did I get here?
Mhm.
And I'm 52 years old at that time. And it's like, what is next? And I had no
Mhm.
idea. I mean, this is the only life I had known. And so I was willing to do anything, which is really the key to change, is that you have to be open to taking all the suggestions, not fighting anymore, not figuring out, can you hold on to anything that you've brought with you to this point? And you need to start rebuilding from the ground up in a way that, and it helps to have people that have been through this before to guide you and direct you. Um, and the great thing about this whole process is that it all is traced back to the brain, and the brain is very forgiving. It allows us to take a mulligan and say, that wasn't great, or it hasn't been great, or it's not going great. And I've developed these neurological patterns in my brain, physiological connections of neurons that represent all these different ways of being that are unhealthy. But these neurons aren't organized that way. They don't have to be organized that way. They can change, reorganize themselves if I take the steps to help them reorganize, meaning I have to change how I think, feel, and act. And then gradually that brain will begin to reorganize and reshape itself in a new, different way. So, yeah, thank God the brain is willing to change, adapt, and evolve, which is neuroplasticity. That's one of the gifts of the brain.
Yeah, and it's and we'll talk more about the neuroscience, for sure, and one of the things that you said is this process of recovery that really requires a ripping out of all of these different habit structures and attitudes, behaviors that we built, uh, in our life as a whole. I think, and I went through the 12-step process as well. I went through it twice. The first time around was not very serious. I thought I was, yeah, I'll do this, and I already know most of the stuff, and so I'll give it a go. The second time was very much after my own rock bottom, which happened far later than I would have anticipated. It was years into my recovery when I realized I still had an addictive mindset, and it was causing very deep pain for my loved ones, my wife especially. And I realized I have so far to go. And it was that same feeling that you talk about of, how did I end up here? How can I possibly be in this space right now? I thought I had things figured out. And it's that ripping away of, in a lot of ways, kind of what I thought made me me, right? I think I had these underlying beliefs of, I'm a smart person and I'm a kind person. And those are like really positive things. But I realized how many decisions, especially when I went through my step 4 and 5, how many decisions I had made in my life that were neither smart nor kind. They were very foolish and very unkind, mean, rude, selfish, self-centered. And I had to take a good look at my life, and that journaling process, that writing out that inventory of your whole life, that was so powerful for me to be able to step back and to realize I have not lived up to what I thought I was, what I thought I was aiming for. And that left me in a space for a bit of feeling shame and sorry for myself and all that, those things. But then soon after, getting to a space of that acceptance of, okay, I see where I am. What do I want to create now? What do I want to build? And who do I want to be? And that really is just getting down to that very foundation. That's what I felt like. I felt like everything had been ripped out from under me. My whole foundation had been just essentially removed. And I was like, what am I left with now?
It, it, it can be very freeing. I mean, I actually felt, because these old patterns, these old ways of being, thinking, feeling, acting, especially when they're unhelpful and unwanted and don't serve us well and have consequences and are causing people around us pain, there's a big weight attached to that, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, not a lot of us get a lot of joy from being an asshole. Um, there's just nothing good in that. And so the idea that you can, if you can truly shed all of that, all of your ego, everything that's holding on to any vestige of who you were, it's very liberating because the weight is gone. It's
Mm-hmm.
uncertain because you don't know what's next, and you don't even know there can be a next or how that would even come about. Like, can we, this whole idea, can people actually change? And then you hear half the people say yes, half the people say no. Well, thank God for science. It is proven that we can change. And so, there are certain very primitive wiring that we have, the need to survive, the need to socialize, the need, and there's psychological primitives, okay, they were born with. But all of our thoughts, feelings, emotions, actions, all of that is malleable. So really our personalities, even the stuff we're born with from our parents, we're given some predisposition that way. But, if what we were given we don't like and we wanted to change it, even the stuff that we were born with can be massaged and formed and worked with over the years. And that's all through the process of neuroscience, reorganizing our neurons through new, more helpful thoughts, feelings, and action.
And I think a lot of people feel, especially perhaps especially in Western society, will feel like victims to their genetics. Right? I came with such and such building blocks. This is just the way that I am. This is how my dad was, or they can feel. I think there's certainly the message, especially when it comes to mental illnesses like anxiety or depression or addiction, right? And a chemical imbalance in the brain that this is the way I am. This is the way that I will always be, and almost without question, that this is what I'll always feel like, and I just need to accept it and deal with it. I'm a victim to it. Would you say that's true? And how do you see that? What's possible versus what's not?
Yeah. So I need to be a little careful just because I'm not a psychiatrist, and there
Sure.
are things that we're born with, if they are imbalances that we're born with and maybe can't be uh, that need to be addressed through medication. That's one thing. I'm one of those people. I have imbalances of brain chemistry. I'm very low on serotonin, and so I
Hmm. Hmm.
need to take medication to help enhance that imbalance or balance it.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
so there is that. And, thank God we live in today's world where those treatments can be available. That's part of it. But there's also, so much that we do have control over, if we understand how and have the motivation and commitment to see it through. I mean, so many people, and that's where this idea of change comes about, um, don't change because they don't want to invest the motivation and commitment into seeing it through until it becomes habitual and lifestyle oriented.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
that's this whole idea of the brain. Its main job is to make sure that you survive, that you're safe. It loves familiarity because it doesn't know if the unfamiliar is going to threaten you. So by the idea of change, it doesn't know what that looks like yet. And so it's resistant to go there. Doesn't even matter what it is because it doesn't know it yet. It hasn't been introduced to it. And so that's where we have to have a motivation commitment to work through all that until the brain experiences enough of what this change begins to look like and gets enough feel good chemical neurotransmitter, to reinforce it. And then it says, wow, this change wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And it actually feels pretty good. It's a whole lot better than that old addictive lifestyle. Let's go do some more of that. But that's where these initial processes of change are hard because they are so unfamiliar. The brain is resistant inherently. And then, so therefore, we have to create this change in our conscious mind. And the front part of our brain is the prefrontal cortex, where all of our executive control, our thinking, our decision making, our impulse control, our judgment, our evaluation, all of this stuff that makes us like uniquely human. Almost half of our neurons in our brain are located in that area. That is the part of the brain that has to work hard at this change. Okay, that when you hear change is hard, or when you find it to be hard, that's why, is because we're having the body and brain are exerting a lot of resource in that part of our brain to make that change happen. And so the key to that is to stick with it long enough to identify enough reward around what this is going to be like once we get to the end. And then, keep at it, keep practicing. The brain loves repetition. So the brain is very much like the muscles in our body. When we go to the gym and rep our biceps over and over and over again, and we start to see, changes and better muscle development, that's the same with the brain. It loves to rep in order to know that things are safe, there's reward in it, and then these neurons start to develop and attach to one another that represent this change that you're trying to implement. And then they grow stronger like roots on a tree. Yeah, the more you rep it, the more you're fertilizing the roots, the more you're watering them. And then before you know it, a few weeks, a few months down the road, you've got a whole new pattern developed and change is well underway. And that change begins to then become easier. You don't have to work and think about it as hard. And it begins to move from the front part of your brain, that conscious, always have to work and think at it, into the back part of the brain where the subconscious lives. And it joins all the other habits that you just know how to do automatically, like how to brush your teeth, how to ride a bike, all those things that are just, you don't even have to think about it. And that's the finish line in terms of where we want to get to for these new patterns, is to have them transfer from the conscious part of the brain to the subconscious, and then they become a lifestyle.
And I love that description, George. And one of the things that I reflect on as you say that are the number of people that I've worked with who will tell me, and I have an understanding from a firsthand experience of this, having felt this exact way for years in my own addiction and subsequent attempts to recover, that there is kind of this response that some people might have to what you're saying, which is, Well, that sounds great, George, and that's well and good that that's the science of it and what you've seen to be true, but it's not true for me. It's not the way that it works for me. I can't stay consistent with things. I can't build these habits. I feel unable to do that. I I start trying to work on a habit and become consistent with it, and maybe I can keep that up for a few days or a week or even a month or two, and then I always fail. I always end up capitulating, or I always end up, taking several steps backwards and falling off the horse. What would you say to those people who struggle with that feeling of powerlessness or hopelessness or this inability to get consistent with something? Perhaps what have you seen as effective for you, or what do you think would be helpful for them?
Sure. So all these change processes that we're discussing are scientifically proven. So they
So
work.
in other words, they're wrong. They don't.
It's not, well, I'm not, you know, change is hard, as I just said.
Mm,
And these
yeah.
patterns that have been developed over these years that we've now identified as unhelpful and unwanted, again, think of them as roots at the bottom of a tree. And these patterns that are really thick and that keep pulling us back are usually emotionally charged. The ones that are emotionally charged have a lot of emotion attached to them, cause these neural pathways or roots to go really strong, and they're powerful.
Yes.
And so, because even if they're unpleasant, the brain knows that they're familiar. They understand what being that way is like, and they know that you haven't died from it yet. And so, even though they're unpleasant, the brain would rather the familiar than the unfamiliar, because it doesn't know that the unfamiliar is not going to kill you. And so
It's
that,
scary. It's scary, right? What's unfamiliar is scary.
yeah, and that's the brain telling you that it's uncertain about what
Hmm.
you're going to take it into, um, won't be worse than this uncomfortableness that we're in right now. That is what's happening neurologically. And that probably makes sense to people at a logical level. Okay.
Hmm.
So now, in order for us to change, the brain, which wants reward, think of training your dog, not that we're dogs, although our midbrains, our primitive midbrains that operate off reward, the reward network, um, very much acts like a dog. A dog is never going to learn a new behavior unless you treat it, right? Over and over and over again until it begins to associate reward with that new thing that you want it to do. The same thing goes with our brains, is that the reason that we don't stay with things is because we have not identified enough reward attached to that new way of being to have it um, uh, be,
Build those new pathways, right? Emotionally. Is
yes,
that
but that reward also has to be more significant. We have to create more subjective value out of that and really visualize and experience that reward in order to keep heading down this path of change. Because if the brain doesn't detect and experience sufficient reward along the way that is willing to keep it going down that path of uncertainty, then it will stop.
Yep.
And so, that's where a lot of this stuff, that's what being stuck is, right? You're stuck in your patterns and you feel like you can't change. That's what stuck is. And so that's why people work with guys like you and me, coaches, is because we can partner with them and guide them, reassure and guide them down this path, as long as it takes until they actually feel like they're beginning to transform. And transform means, dramatic um, uh, shifting in one's behavior that is, or experiences that is sustainable and long lasting. And so, um, that's a lot of this shifting and transformational processes and changing happens, you know, y- usually it's, 90 days, 120 days, 180 days, depending on how much motivation and commitment you have, how many other things you have going on in your life, how much time you can spend on focusing on this change. But you're looking at staying with something, for a good 90 plus days, and it has to be reinforced constantly. There's a process in which the brain must follow in order for it to get over the hump past the point of, having to work at this so hard.
And one of the things that I think about when you say that, George, is, one of the things that I emphasize with clients is gratitude and the power of gratitude. I think that exactly what you're saying with when it comes to habits, there needs to be emotion involved, right? In order to feel the reward, for me to build in new pathways. It can't just be logical. I can't just go through the motions. And so gratitude is one of those keys or those tools that I found that works so well in after I do something that is what I'm aiming for. It is my goal, no matter how small or big. It can be something little. Really just, even for 10 seconds, just feeling that gratitude of I did it, I accomplished it, this is positive, I achieved the goal that I'm aiming for, getting some of that emotion in there into this new habit structure, so that it's more of an emotional experience. And for me in my life for years now, actually, before I start something and after I finish, for me, it's both the gratitude and the good of others. Those are two of the things that I emphasize in a mindset, centering on how is this impacting the world in a positive way? How is this impacting others in a positive way? And what am I grateful for with it? That way, if I can insert this outward focus of meaning and blessing others and doing good in the world, and then also this gratitude that I feel, I'm shifting those habits, I'm shifting those patterns, because otherwise I can default to this sucks, it's hard, I don't like it, it's difficult, where I think emphasizing how is this making a positive difference in the world, or how is this helping me feel better, right? What can I be grateful for about it? Really inserting that emotion.
Yeah, and when you sit in gratitude and when you focus on how your actions are helping others, we feel great about ourselves. We get the surges of neurochemicals, these feel good chemicals, endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, which all represent reward for the brain. That's the brain's reward juice. And so the key here is to experience reward, whether it's in the form of gratitude, focus on how what you're doing is helping others, um, how what you're doing is aligning with this new identity and the values that you have identified for yourself, um, and do it a lot. So, you know, when we've learned how to play golf or took up a new language or picked up an instrument for the first time, we didn't expect that we would be good at it in a week, a month, 2 months. We knew it was going to take some time, and it was hard. Learning a new instrument, learning a new language is hard. We have to have the same, and by the way, all that learning is going on in the brain. So learning how to be different, learning how to have new experiences, new thoughts, emotions, and actions and behaviors can be as hard as learning a language or learning an instrument. So if we look at it that way and just stick with it, because we know that down the road and as we're going, we practice these reinforcing reward activities like gratitude and focusing on how what we're doing benefits others. And, it's just incenting us, our brain, to keep with the process and keep heading down that path. So, I just think sometimes that we need to understand that this is a very gradual shifting, and the brain, we have to partner with the brain and understand what the brain needs in order for it to get from point A to point B. And that's where coaching can help is because we can explain these concepts to people so that they can get their arms around them. Because otherwise, you're just in this process of trying to change and you're being pulled back because the brain wants to stay in the familiar and you don't know why you're frustrated. You don't know why. What's it going to take? Why can't I stay with this? And if you can get some education around what's happening during these change processes and why you need to stick with it so long and what needs to happen along the way for you to stick with it, that's very empowering and very, again, it's like lifting a weight off your shoulders because now you understand. Now you understand what it takes.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned some things earlier when you were talking about your story, George, with reference to what you used to be like and then how the addictions played into that. From a habits perspective or a psychological or emotional perspective, or other areas that you reflect on, why do we go to addiction? What do you see as so consistent for people and why we seek out addiction in the first place?
Well, I think addiction is a stress response. Um, so, you're living your life. You've got a lot of uncomfortable thoughts and feelings. They're leading to, you know, actions that are not serving you well. You might be flying off the handle, you know, uh, straining relationships, causing problems at work. And there's a lot of emotion, as you previously described, wrapped up in these things. And they're supercharged. And the ones that get really strong are the ones that have the high intensity emotion attached to them. And so this is our life, sometimes every moment of every day. And these things keep recurring. Every time they recur, they get stronger. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we just get awful, and it's stressful. We're highly activated. The reason our brains get highly activated is because a lot of these things that the meaning that we attach to these thoughts and emotions, the brain says, well, we're under attack. Our survival's at jeopardy. And we have to alert our systems to deliver the necessary resources to be able to fight or flight. And so it's pulling on adrenaline, cortisol, the stress hormone, norepinephrine, all these chemicals which cause our system to activate, time to fight or flight. The problem is we're always in that state. And so the systems cannot handle. It's like you're sitting there in your car, revving your engine all day, every day, and there's no time for it to rest. We're going to wear out that way, and we're looking for relief. Again, our brain needs reward. It's like, dude, you are stressing me out. I need some relief here. I'm going to find it any way I can find it. I remember that drinking and using drugs helps this all go away. And so the use of that as a coping mechanism for the constant activation, the constant stress response, and the constant survival instincts of the brain. And the problem is then, once we start consuming and experiencing that reward, the amount of reward measured in dopamine, particularly, is so much higher than any other form of reward that we can get from natural life's pleasures that the brain automatically wants to pursue it because it loves reward. And so that's that spiral that we get into where nothing else compares to the relief that we get from the drug or the alcohol because of the dopamine surge that we get. And so we just keep pursuing it. And then the brain is so overflooded with dopamine unnaturally that parts of it begin to shut down. So we have to do more and more to get the same effect, which is tolerance. And then every time that because we're doing more and more, every time we stop doing it, we start to go through withdrawal, which is the drop of the dopamine levels. Dopamine spikes to an incredibly high level. It starts to drop. We feel withdrawal. We'll do anything we can to feel normal again, which is a spiked dopamine level. So we've got to do more drugs because it's the only thing that will get us there. And so it's a malfunctioning of the whole reward system is what addiction is. But the reason we start using is to get relief from this discomfort that we feel mentally.
And that makes me reflect on my life. I remember, this may seem somewhat unrelated, but it certainly is related. When I was 16 years old, I had horrific acne, so bad. Like I probably at any given time had 100 zits on my face. It was terribly painful. Not to mention what it did for me self-esteem wise. And I remember I was at a doctor or I can't remember exactly, but some kind of specialist, and I was speaking with them about my issues, and they said, well, one of the main places that acne comes from is stress. That's one of the underlying causes of acne. And they asked me, how are your stress levels? And I remember at 16, I was like, I don't really get stressed. I mean, I think I'm really good generally. And years down the road, I remember as I was going through significant transformations emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, I was changing my nutrition and my physical health. I remember reflecting on that and realizing that I was always stressed out. That's why I didn't know that I was stressed, is because every second of every day, just like you said, that engine that's on overdrive, it's just we're constantly hitting that accelerator. It was on 24/7, other than when I was asleep, kind of. And it was social anxiety and depression and all these things. But really, if you look at the core of that from a psychological perspective, it was fear. I was in fear all of the time. I was feeling shame. I'm not good enough. I don't match up. How do I compare to other people? This was a constant underlying theme of my brain and how I saw the world. And that, it's no wonder to me that I sought out things like video games and porn, and then eventually drugs and alcohol and food and all these things, in order to numb that and try to bring myself up, as you're saying, increase my dopamine, increase serotonin, all these things, because I was in this state of constant overdrive and constant perfectionism and fear, right? That was just my life, right? It was just how I always felt.
Yeah. And, sounds like our stories are similar. Maybe I call it ice cream, right? All of us that grew up with this kind of discomfort and use and abuse substances and behaviors to comfort ourselves, like it all kind of resembles each other. The flavors might be a little different, but it all kind of looks and feels the same. And a lot of this, in the rooms that I've been in and, all the people I've talked to, it all starts in childhood in some way, shape, or form. And they're either discomforts that we're born with or experienced environmentally from how our upbringing is. And invariably, we just don't feel good enough. Something's wrong with us. We're not acceptable the way we are. And that leads into all of this negative thinking and feeling. And then all these behaviors that we use to act out as a result of it. And so.
And I think one of the ways to understand it it's been very impactful for me is an IFS perspective, internal family systems. Don't know if you're familiar at all. But when I understood that we deal with pain primarily a lot of times either by inhibiting. So in other words, I'm going to become more rigid, perfectionistic, can't make mistakes, need to do everything right, or I need to become kind of this management of my life and ensuring that I don't experience suffering or complications, etc. Or through disinhibiting, which would be the impulsivity, the addictions, the behaviors that are highly rewarding, exciting, novel. These are ways to deal with pain, right? These are ways to deal with the underlying feelings of insecurity. because I think for many years I felt all this horrible shame about what's wrong with me. Why do I go to these addictions? I'm such a morally flawed person. And I think there's plenty of those messages out there. I think psychology can be so powerful when we then understand, here's what's really going on. Here are so many of the root causes. Your brain is doing its very best to deal with the pain, the discomfort, the suffering that you're experiencing through this disinhibition, right? Through this impulsivity, these addictions, etc., trying to fill that hole that is within you, as you say, either from things that you carried, right, into, from birth, things that you picked up in your environment. And often it's both. I think it's a combination. I think one of the things, George, that I definitely want to reflect on that was very powerful when I was speaking to you last time, just in our personal conversation, is the nutritional end of all of this and nutritional science, because you have some insights and you've done some things yourself, diet transformation wise, and it's impacted your recovery, it's impacted your mindset, it's impacted your life. Would love to talk about what things looked like for you nutritionally and how that integrates with neuroscience or psychology and how the brain functions and how that's shifted for you. What kind of impacts that's made? So perhaps just starting with, what were you eating like? What did your nutrition look like in the past? And how do you see that playing into your susceptibility to addiction, perhaps?
Yeah. So going back to the brain, we just finished talking about how hard change can be. And so one of the key things that we can do is giving the brain its best chance of success to operate function at a premium level and perform the type of change that we want to ask it to perform. And so we need to invest in the brain in all the ways that we can to give it the best chance of success. And so that includes not just diet, nutrition, but exercise, sleep, mindfulness, giving the brain moments of respite. Because again, the brain is not really geared towards running at 6,000 RPMs all the time. And so we really need to understand how the brain works best and partner with it like we do with other parts of our body. I mean, we seem to give other parts of our body more respect than we give our brains. The brains we just seem to take for granted and just assume it's going to be there performing without any investment in it. We certainly spend a lot of time on our looks and, all the things that are, skincare and maybe going to the gym so our body looks better. But what are we doing around investing in conditioning and taking care of the brain? And so things like diet and nutrition are absolutely critical for the brain operating at peak performance. When we eat, how much we eat, the types of things that we eat are all super critical. And frankly, for anyone that's in recovery or trying to reinvent themselves or finding better way of being, addressing all of these fundamentals is a really smart, holistic approach to making, this new version of yourself become possible. It's almost like when you described earlier your first bout of a recovery where you kind of had 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and what you got was not much of anything, right? I mean, recovery is one of those deals where you are either all in or you're kind of straddling, and that's why what you hear about are like dry drunks, people that are sober, maybe not using or drinking, but they just are still miserable because they haven't recovered yet. And sobriety and recovery are two completely different concepts. One is being abstinent. The other is becoming a whole different and better version of yourself. And so this this concept of applying these concepts to every aspect of your life is really important, because otherwise, let's say that you were practicing gratitude every day, which is a great mindfulness technique that gives your brain reward and helps reinforce new behaviors, but you were eating Captain Crunch all day. Okay, to me, what that says is you've got 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And the brain is going to not operate anywhere near at its peak level and not want to accompany you on this journey of change if you are flooding it with processed food, foods that are high in sugar, having inflammatory effects on your brain, which actually cause impairments in the brain and are being linked to things such as, cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, dementia, etc.
Yep.
So it really stands to reason that we apply a holistic, complete approach to recovery that includes everything we do with ourselves all day long, every day. And so, with me, I have a workout program. I know what it's going to look like every single day. It's very intentional. I have about probably 12 to 15 foods that I eat all day, every day. I don't eat anything out of a box. I don't eat anything out of a package. I eat whole foods. And I don't really eat meals much anymore. I graze. I don't eat past the point of no longer being hungry. I used to stuff my face because my relationship with food was about comfort. It was just like a drug or a drink.
Yeah.
It was about trying to feel better in whatever way that I thought that was. And being an addictive person, if I knew that food was going to give my brain reward, well, why not eat more? Because that's more reward.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the way that I guess I looked at it. I'm not even sure I thought that much about it. All I knew was all my body felt, my brain felt is I'm an addict. I'm uncomfortable. I need reward. So I just ate whatever I wanted, whatever sounded good. And so, this is a great, really, example, an analogy of change, in that if that's the way I was eating before, how was it that I was going to change that? And how was it that I was going to give my brain was going to receive more reward from eating differently? So what it required was this gradual shift in changing my behaviors and actions and associating new and different rewards that would be more significant down the road towards eating better. And so I started really focusing on the types of foods I wanted to eat that would deliver, a diverse macronutrient mix of the types of foods I needed to eat, the carbs, the proteins, and the fats, and the types of foods that I wanted to deliver those macronutrients. So what you'll see me eating lots today are just lean proteins. I eat a ton of spinach and broccoli. I pick at olives. I pick at nuts and seeds. I have a banana every day. I eat red grapes. And there's probably a few more foods, and I just eat those foods every day, all day, and that's all I do. And so, and those foods will deliver. And then I'm very careful about how much I eat, never eating too much, so that I don't get stuffed and full and tired. I just want to curb my hunger. So everything's very intentional. How much I'm eating, when I'm eating, what windows of time I'm eating in, what foods I'm eating. And what's happened is my brain has now, it was unknown, so it was uncomfortable, but my brain now associates an incredible amount of reward with that type of eating, because it aligns with my inner core values of wanting to be healthier and wanting to live with more intention and wanting to do the right thing. and wanting to have a clear mind and clear body. And then as I headed down that path, I began to feel better and I began to have more energy. And so then it began to reinforce itself even more. Um,
Yes, and it's mirror to my own experience, George. Hearing you say that, it's like I I get giddy inside. I'm like, it's so what you're saying is so incredibly profound and important for not just for sobriety, but for overall feeling happy and good in life. And I remember, and as you say, it's gradual over years of time. My the importance I placed on food used to be, and this is how I approached many other aspects of my life, kind of all aspects of my life, it was about how much pleasure can I glean from this experience? How much feelings for me, right, of pleasure can I glean out of it? And over time with food, and at the exact same time with all other areas of my life, it became, what can I do to bring the most meaning into my life, the most purpose? How can I live in a way that is intentional and based on real values that bring me joy, that bring the people around me joy in the long run? And with food, it changed from pleasure to meaning. It changed from, I want this food to make me feel good now, to, I want this food to make me feel good in the long run, right? That it's going to actually help me and fuel all the other things that I want to do with my life. And I think that one of the things that became very, very frustrating for me as I was trying to make that change, and one of my motivations was, I saw how much food was inhibiting me from being able to do the other things I wanted to in my life. The more processed food I ate, and all sorts of different, sugary foods, etc., I couldn't do the other things with my life that I wanted to, right? I had ambitions. I wanted to make differences in people's lives. I wanted to show up with energy and excitement and love. I could not do that if I was eating foods that were not good for my body. And so I became more and more and more conscious of, how does this food make me feel? And that for me now is probably, I would say, 85 to 90% of why I eat is, what does this make me feel like inside? What's it doing for me? How is it fueling the other things I want to do in life? And then that 10 to 15% is, I enjoy food. Eating food is pleasurable, right?
yeah.
And that's a massive shift from where things used to be, which was probably the opposite, right? Of about 90% was the pleasure of what this food is giving me, and 10% is about, how does it make me feel? I was not hardly cognizant of that. And I think, unfortunately, I think that's the case for a lot of people. And unfortunately, I think that there's very little to no messaging of what you eat impacts the way that you feel mentally, emotionally, your energy levels, how you show up every single day. And I just simply can't do the things in my life that I want to do if I'm not eating right and putting in the fuel that I then get out, right, for the other things that I want to do in my life. And so for you have this very, what some people would maybe consider a highly restrictive diet, but for you, you're saying it doesn't feel that way. It actually feels very pleasurable in the sense of this meaning, this purpose, this feels great for me. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. I mean, not all of these foods are the foods I love to eat. So it's not like I went online and found a diet and said, you got to eat these foods. I simply wrote down a list of all the foods I love to eat. And in some cases, like, I dress them up a little bit. So, when I have my spinach, and I have a lot of spinach, I pour some vegetable stock in the little microwave bag that I'm going to steam it in. So that adds some flavor. And then it comes out, I put it in a bowl. I add some Parmesan cheese, which is, one of the best cheeses you can have, because it's hard cheese and much lower in fat than other forms of cheese. I add lemon, and I add a little bit of salt. And so by the time I'm done with it, it's fabulous, and it's delivering all kinds of nutrients. Um, you know,
It sounds delicious. It sounds amazing.
and it is. It's like I'd rather have that than anything else. So it's actually I'm actually enjoying these foods. And the more that you eat them and associate gratitude around eating them and experience the reward of how it makes you feel, not just from a physical standpoint and mental standpoint, but the fact that it aligns with your values and the identity of this person that you want to be. Because this new version of yourself is a package that is compiled of everything that you're going to do in your life, all has to align together. You can't have some things that align and some things that don't. Otherwise, you'll be at cross purposes of yourself and in constant conflict. And that's not a good mental place to be in. Again, we want to elude discomfort. We want to get into comfort by aligning everything with our core identity, the way that we've now defined how we want it to be going forward. So you can't, be eating like crap and exercising like a fiend. You can't be, getting 3 hours of sleep at night, but eating right. Like all of this has to come together, in a package to deliver a result that is in alignment with this new identity that you want for yourself. So I don't feel like I'm missing anything by eating this way. I actually feel like I'm getting more out of eating. My relationship with eating has changed completely. Like you were describing, it's a complete mindset shift. Instead of getting like maybe spikes of dopamine from eating a bunch of crap food, which I know is going to spike up and then dissipate, and then I'm going to feel guilty. Now I get more serotonin, which is that feel-good meaning chemical that wells up within you from the heart and the soul and stays with you longer. It's not a spiky thing. It's a thing that when you feel goosebumps, that's serotonin. It's that feel-good, wellness, well-being chemical that says, yeah, this is right. This is in alignment with my values. There's no downside to this. It's all upside. It's all positive. This is who I want to be. And so you start wrapping together all your life, building it, constructing it with all of these approaches to the different things that you want to do in your life. You have to eat, sleep, so you start forming those in a way that aligns with your values and then putting other things in place that also will, help you become that person that you want to be.
It's true. I can't agree with that enough. I mean, really and I hadn't ever thought about it quite that way, in that everything you are doing is aligning with your values and becoming authentic as you possibly can. And I think that it's important to say as well, my values, and I wouldn't say my deepest values, because I think my deepest values reflect how I live now, right? I'm not perfect in that, but to the best of my ability. But the values that I was actively living on a daily basis were, for my own pleasure, getting mine and all those types of things that were, it was not aligned with the type of life that deep inside I really, really wanted. It was more of those surface values, quote unquote, that were misaligned with those deeper values. Don't know if I'm quite tying that together properly, but
yeah, and look at how uncomfortable you were as a result. When your thoughts, feelings, and actions, behaviors are not in alignment with that underlying core fabric of who you want to be, no wonder you're uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
your representations of how you're experiencing the world are running in complete contrast from how you want to be. No wonder you're uncomfortable. No wonder, we want to use drugs and alcohol to get away from that discomfort. So again, change is all about taking the studs down, getting rid of all those old patterns, thoughts, feelings, actions, behaviors, and then reforming your life, reconstructing it in a way that is in alignment with that identity.
And um, it's a constant dissonance, right? I think that's one way of describing it. I was living in a constant state of dissonance when I was in addiction and all the other habits that I had. And it is this feeling of anxiety and fear and, oh, if only people knew what I was really like. And, if people saw behind the scenes, behind this mask, they would see this very deeply flawed person. I think one of the freeing aspects, and it's not just, again, like you said, it's not just about sobriety, but it's about living with what I refer to as a mindset and lifestyle of recovery. When your choices and your mindset and all these things can align, and the better and better they align, the less and less fear I have. I don't need to hide things. I can be authentic about who I am and speak the way that I see things. And that's all developing for all of us, right? None of us are perfect in that. But the closer and closer you can align, as you say, your values with your actual choices, it's like, well, now I'm at peace in my relationships, and when I go out in public and when I talk to people, I can be who I am because I don't have all this crap that I'm hiding under the surface that I don't want anybody to see. That is very, very freeing, very freeing.
Yeah, and I describe and define recovery as the never-ending pursuit of becoming the best version of ourselves, that version that we identify for ourselves. Now, this is a path that we get on, and the path is not fresh asphalt. It's made of cobblestone, and so it can be a little bumpy, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, we are humans, and humans are inherently, flawed. Nobody's perfect, and so what it is this pursuit of trying to minimize the number of imperfections and the severity of them, and giving yourself grace when you are imperfect, but staying on the path.
Mm-hmm.
And, don't fall off the path. Don't get stuck in a pothole. We have to keep moving. And like you say, it's this mindset of a never ending pursuit. That means it never ends. You never get someplace. There's never a finish line. I think there's only been 5 truly enlightened people ever in the world. I don't remember all 5, but it's like the Mother Teresa's and the Gandhis of the world.
Yep.
And even they might claim that, they were imperfect as well. But
Yeah.
the rest of us are just on this path trying to see where it leads. And actually, there's just a ton of joy in being on the path. It's amazing how fewer bad things happen to you, how less dramatic your life is, how much more, how people like you a lot more when you're on this path, because you're just trying to do what's right and being the best version of yourself. And so there's joy in that, and you feel it, that you get reward from that. These neurotransmitters inside of you are firing, and signals are being released that you're on the right path. You feel good about yourself because you're in alignment with your values.
I couldn't have said it better myself, George. I love that. Is there anything else that you feel we haven't touched on or spoken about today that you want to share with people and make sure they hear?
Yeah, just, a note of encouragement and hope in that, no matter how bad you are at this moment, how stuck you feel, the level of discomfort, Jake and I will both tell you that there is a way up. I sat in rehab, listening to these people that would come in and speak and tell us, bright-eyed, and they were as miserable as I had been at one point in their life, telling me that there was a different way. And I didn't believe it. I just couldn't imagine it. But I said, okay, you're all I got. And so I'm in, and then I just took the small baby steps of doing what I was told, what was suggested to me. It led me down it got me on this path of recovery of which I've never stepped off of. And it's taken me down all kinds of paths that I never thought were possible. It's taken me into the brain to understand how all this change actually happens. And thank God the brain is forgiving and willing to give us a second chance and to reinvent itself. It's there for you to partner with, but you know, what you have to bring is motivation and commitment. The rest can, there's help out there to help you with the rest, but you just have to find it within you to be motivated and committed to, make this change happen for yourself, but it's possible.
I love that. It's true. Well, thank you for saying that, George. And where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. My name is George Haymaker on LinkedIn, but also my website, georgehaymaker.com, Haymaker. Bunch of information there, as well as a link for a free discovery call. We can talk for 30 minutes for free to talk about your situation and just see if we're a good fit to work together.
Love it. Love it. Well, so many excellent pieces of wisdom today, George. I appreciate you being vulnerable and open and showing, being able to share with people so many things that are important for them to hear. And it's just such a personal pleasure for me to have you on the show and have this discussion. It was awesome for me.
I'm grateful, Jake, and I feel all kinds of great neurochemicals going on in my body and my brain and all this reward going. I think I'm going to stay on the path for one more day at least.
I love it. That's right. Take another 24 hours.
There you go.
Very good.
Pick them off.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, George.
You bet, Jake.